Hi, this is Christine Lavin, and you are listening to Retrospectives with John Broughton here on KC Radio 97.7 FM. And can you believe it? He's been on the air for more than 25 years, and he still looks and sounds good.
What does contiguous mean?
Yeah, on Friday night I had a horrible travel day because of bad weather, and I didn't arrive to my concert till 10 o'clock at night for an 8 o'clock show. And luckily the audience waited for me, but I was so exhausted at the end that I wasn't paying attention when I walked off stage, and I did a twisting somersault over a platform.
Oh, no.
And banged up my leg and my ankle and my head, and landed in full view of the audience with my microphone on, so it really sounded terrible. Sounded much worse than it was.
It looked, yeah. Wow. That's a bad day at the office?
Excuse me?
That's a bad day at the office?
Yeah, but I knew that I probably wasn't hurt too badly because my first words were, "Is my guitar okay?" And it was.
Oh,
I guess I cradled it like a baby when I fell.
Let's talk about a little bit of background first before we talk about what you're up to these days.
Okay.
Growing up for you, was music always going to be a major part of your life?
Oh, no, not at all. I grew up at an all-boys military school where my father was a teacher, and I have 8 brothers and sisters, and I went to college as a nursing major, so I planned to be a nurse. And I played guitar from the age of 12 on, but that was... I was never really encouraged to make a career out of being a musician or a songwriter, because that's not a very safe career. When you come from a family of 9 kids, I think the parents are very concerned about, just keeping your body and soul together, and wanted us all to have safe careers. And folk singing isn't exactly a safe career.
When music did become a focus for you, who were some of the first artists that began to attract your attention?
It's a lot of the ones that influenced our whole generation. That would be, guess, Bob Dylan, Peter, Paul and Mary, Pete Seeger, Judy Collins, Joni Mitchell, early Linda Ronstadt, Tom Lehrer, people like that.
What do you think it was about the folk type acts that caught your attention like that?
What I've always liked about this music is that it's real music. It's sort of musical nonfiction, and it's songs and stories about real life, even if sometimes the imagination gets involved and some of the details are changed. There's a real ring of truth to this music, and I've always found real life to be way more interesting than fiction. And so I'm also drawn to that same kind of thing in music.
When did you begin writing?
When I was 13. I wrote my first song. It was terrible. It was called "The World Is Coming to an End." But so right off the bat, I think I had a twisted sense of humor when it came to writing songs.
You did a lot of odd jobs in your younger years before you turned to music full time. Can you run through some of them for us? And was a career in music always on the back of your mind at this time?
Well, I've always, there's no dignity in starving, so I've always worked to pay my way. And some of the stranger jobs I had, when I lived in Florida, I worked as a temp, as a secretary, and on weekends I would sell Cracker Jacks in the Orange Bowl where the Miami Dolphins played, the professional football team. And I would make 7 cents a box, and at most I would make $8 a game. But I found that to be a sort of a fun job, and I like to watch football. But I demonstrated video games at a toy convention, and I was a bread baker and a waitress at the Cafe Lena in Saratoga Springs. And when I first came to New York, I worked as a temp for the first 6 years, and every week I was in a different office, mostly doing secretarial kinds of work. But I worked all over the island of Manhattan, and I still have people who come to my shows who say, "You once were my secretary."
You were, I guess, a comparatively late starter in terms of your recording career. Did you actively seek a recording career beforehand, or did you feel not quite ready?
Well, I moved to New York in 1976 to pursue music, and I started taking guitar lessons with Dave Van Ronk and performing, and it took me a while to to find out if I was any good or not. And it was finally in 1984 when I quit my day job. I was a secretary at Bellevue Hospital, and I was 32 years old at the time, and it was sort of a now or never situation. If I was going to try to do it, I had to quit the day job and plunge into it full time and be able to travel. And it was very risky because at Bellevue I was making $25,000 a year and had a month's paid vacation and all the benefits. And my first year as a full-time folk singer, I made $6,000 and lost all of my benefits. But I slowly, every year I would make a little more. And then a couple of years ago I had the good fortune of doing a voiceover for a television commercial, and then I even got health insurance for 2 years, which now I'm on my own individual plan. But 32 years old is rather late, especially for a woman to decide to jump with both feet into the music business.
Well, I'd like to leave you with this one. How many of you are...
who you cite as a major influence, I guess somewhat of a mentor too, would that be right?
Yes. When I first came to New York, I took lessons from him for about 2 years, and then for the third year, in exchange for lessons, I worked as his transcription of letters and dashes and numbers to teach his guitar fingering. And like Dave, I am left-handed and play right-handed guitar, so we were a very good match. When you're a left-handed person playing right-handed guitar, you have a much stronger, a much smarter left hand than most guitar players, but a much stupider right hand. So, but he had me open a lot of shows for him, and he brought me to concerts. He introduced me to Joni Mitchell, which was a big thrill in my life, but I was so afraid that I was going to say something stupid that I said absolutely nothing at all.
Oh, no.
I just shook her hand and just stood there. And I'm a talker. You could tell I'm a talker. But I didn't want her to remember me as some babbling idiot, so I just shook her hand and nodded my head. She probably thought I was a silent idiot.
I bet you love that moment over again.
Yeah, I would.
You struck up an early deal with Rounder Records. How would you sum up your relationship with them?
Well, what happened is I put out my first record by myself, and I released it in November, which I didn't know was the worst time that you could possibly do that because it's the Christmas rush, and stores will not take an independent record on consignment. So, and Rounder wouldn't, they refused 6 months' worth of my phone calls and letters and sending them tapes and things. But I sent the record myself to radio stations in the Boston area, and it started to get a lot of airplay. And then people would go into record stores and ask for it, and then the record store people would ask the distributors, have you heard there's this girl named Christine Lavin? People are asking for it. We don't know what this record is. And so the distributor people would go back to Rounder in their meetings. They'd say, they keep asking for this Christine Lavin. Of course, then Rounder was embarrassed because here I was the girl for 6 months that they refused to acknowledge. So then they called me up and said, oh, we'll distribute your record. And so they sold, of the first 2,000 records, they sold 800 through their distribution network. And then I was out of it. So they said, well, we'll just put you on our label. So it was, I kind of came in through the back door with them, and I made a number of records. I'm not, I don't know, 8 or 10. And but then I was wooed away from them by Shanachie Records, who promised me all kinds of things, and then absolutely didn't deliver on any of them. So when I had an escape clause in that contract, I jumped through it. Now I really have taken a page from Ani DeFranco's playbook, and I decided I'll just do it myself and see if I can survive in the music business that way. Because Ani is really like Exhibit A of doing it yourself. Is she popular in Australia?
She is, and she's about to. She's here in a couple of weeks, actually, her second tour. She's very popular down here. Yeah.
Yeah, she's quite a little spark plug. I really admire her a great deal.
Well, during the intermission, I think it was...
Work like that and having control over it are obvious. What would be some of the pitfalls that you've come across?
Well, that I have to do a lot of business things and make a lot of business decisions that have nothing to do with music or creativity. And sometimes I just don't want to, because I just... Like this past weekend, I had such a horrible road experience with all these canceled flights, and then on Sunday in San Francisco, a passenger mistakenly walked off with my suitcase that had all of my CDs and equipment for my show that night. So I did a sold-out concert in a new city I've never been to before, and I depend on selling my records directly off the stage, and I didn't have a single record to sell because of this passenger who took my bag and didn't tell anybody for 24 hours that they had it. So it did arrive 2 days later, but things like that are it's very frustrating to have to deal with the the dollars and cents and the nuts and bolts of the business. But I shouldn't complain because I'm still better off doing it myself, I think.
For sure. Let's talk about your songwriting. There's a strong element of humour there in your writing. Is that something you always strive for, not to take things too seriously?
Can you say that last part again?
Is that something you always strive for, that element of humour, so not to take yourself too seriously all the time?
Really, I don't know how my writing happens, because the writing that I admire the most is the really serious, heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching songwriting that hits you between the eyes and totally rips your heart out. And that's what I wish I could write, but for the most part I don't. I end up on the lighter side of things, and I think that probably helps me keep my sanity. But it's some of, I guess, my funniest songs really came out of situations where I was trying to write something deadly serious and something totally bizarre pops out instead. I wish I could figure out how it all works.
How does the process of writing work for you? Do you carry ideas around for a while before you get them down? Do you have a little notebook?
I do make notes when I'm traveling if I don't have my guitar nearby or my computer, and sometimes it's just a word or a phrase that somebody... I have a new song that people seem to really like a lot, and it all started about a year ago. A man who owns a delicatessen in my neighborhood asked me if I knew of anyone he could meet because he wants to get married, and he's a very nice man and in his early 30s and good looking, and I was shocked that he is looking for someone and he can't find someone to marry, and he owns a very successful deli. And about I guess 6 or 7 months after we had that conversation, Frank Sinatra died, and I ended up writing the song about this deli man who's kind of obsessed with Sinatra music, and he's looking for an ultra romantic relationship. It's called Another New York Afternoon, but it's just one of these things that things happen over a number of months, and then one day it occurred to me that there was a song there. But I didn't know when I had that first conversation with him. I never dreamed I would write a song about this guy, and he's a little embarrassed now because people walk into his deli and ask for him and kind of look him over.
You have a best time for writing? A time where you find it works best for you?
It's one of these things that when it hits me, it could be the morning, or the afternoon, or the evening, or the middle of the night. And when it does happen in the middle of the night, then that can just, kiss my sleeping hours goodbye, because then I just won't sleep. I'll just work on the song. It's just, a lot of songwriters feel this way, and I know I do too, that it's almost like we channel the songs. We happen to be in the mode where we're open for it, and we've got a pen in our hand, and somehow the songs are out there, and we kind of harness them, or they come through us, and sometimes I'll look at a song later, and I can't believe that I wrote it. But I did, and so it's a very mystical kind of experience sometimes.
You're quite strong on, which I find quite refreshing, is you make a strong point of promoting the work of other artists as well. Do you feel that kind of support in the mainstream between artists is missing a bit these days?
Well, I'm very disappointed in the music business in general that, they really look at what we do as units, the things that we sell, as if we're just supplying parts for CD players. And there's really, it's unfortunate, songwriters like me, we write from our hearts, and we connect with audience who really respond from their own hearts, but we have to go through this horrible bureaucracy in this business to reach them. And I do anything I can when I find someone who's really special and talented, who is to get a foothold. If I can help in any way, I will. But I don't really have a formula for it. It's just something that I do on my own. Right now, I've been sending CDs around for this woman. Her name is Francesca Blumenthal, and she's written a song called Queens. It's about the borough of Queens, which is just outside of Manhattan. And it's so funny because it's a very it's very sarcastic. But it's like Queens, where potholes turn into ravines, where size 9s become size 18s. Queens, and she sings it in this really very, very funny voice. And I just sent it to Dr. Demento. Do they play him in Australia?
Used to. He's still going, is he?
He's a syndicated show of sort of wacky songs.
Yeah.
And so, I just decided, this is a woman who's a late-in-life songwriter. She's close to 60 years old and has just started writing songs, and I just love what she does. So I just, I feel whenever I can, if I have my foot in the door, that I'll let somebody else go through that door too if I can.
I guess it would help you too, that sense of community amongst songwriters. It must help you a lot with your writing as well.
Yeah, it's very nice, when you get together with other songwriters and your friends, and you can safely feel that you can sing a new song and get good criticism. In fact, yesterday, there's a guy named Robin Bateau who's been on the New York folk scene for a very long time, but now mostly he does commercial jingles, and he called me up the day before because he wanted me to come in to audition for a Chevrolet commercial. Now, I hardly ever do these things, but he writes wonderful little commercials. So we put our heads together, and I called up every girl folk singer that I knew in the New York metropolitan area, and everybody was in there yesterday. We were all back-to-back singing this thing for Chevrolet, and whoever gets it, it will be a lot of money. And it was really fun, and the people at the Jingle House and the ad agency were really amazed because, here we were calling up each other and helping each other with it instead of all competing and wanting others to fail, so that we would. I figure whoever gets it it'll be the best voice for it, and it was just really nice and fun and supportive. And we figured, well, if I don't get this one, maybe they'll call me and I'll get the next one.
FM live work. What's the extent of it and the types of venues that you play over there?
Well, now I perform wireless, and which I just love. I've been wireless for almost a year, so I can leave the stage whenever I feel so inclined. And I also use something called a boomerang phrase sampler, so I can sing harmonies with myself on the spot. And so I played, like this past weekend in Pasadena, I played a 330-seat church, and then the next night I played a 500-seat college theater in San Luis Obispo, and then the next night I was in a brand new club that had 114 seats. So it really varies. And I've also played at the Philly Folk Festival in front of, 7,000 people. But I just want to work, and it's what I do, and I don't care how big or how small a place is. I'd like them to be full. But really, I play in a club close to New York here that has just 60 seats, and that's always a real fun show because the audience is right on top of you.
Yeah. Have you found the wireless technology has altered your on-stage persona a little bit?
Yes, it frees up a performer to, I was having back problems. That's one of the reasons why I went wireless, because they have to stand a certain way. You know what? Can you hold on for just 1 second, because I have this bread in the oven. I just want to make sure it's not burning, because I'm smelling it.
No worries.
Hold on. Okay, I'll be right back. Yeah.
Now, one thing I'm fascinated about, the baton twirling.
Uh-huh.
What about that?
Well, that is something I did when I was in high school, but then I didn't do it for 18 years, but it's like riding a bicycle. You just don't forget it. And at the Vancouver Folk Festival around 1988, the Flying Karamazov brothers were there, and they had a little marching band that would go around the festival grounds every couple hours, and they had a baton twirler who really didn't know how to twirl very well. So I took her aside, and I said, here, I'll show you a couple of moves that you can do, because I can see you're not very comfortable. And she said, oh, would you be our baton twirler? They make me twirl. I'm a glockenspiel player. So I showed up for their next parade and became their baton twirler. And from then on, I would twirl whenever I would share the bill with a band. And I finally figured out that I had to make up a tape so that I could do it in my own show. So it's how I end my shows now, and it's always a whole lot of fun.
You must be the only baton twirling folk singer in the world, I think.
Well, yeah, I don't know of another one, but a lot of baton twirlers do come to the show, and I've had twirl-offs with people outside of the theater. Now, hold on, I'm going to take the bread out.
No worries. A couple of tribute albums of your songs covered by other artists. That must have been a real thrill.
Yeah, it was, though I wish I had known about it, because I would have told them not to do it. It was. I don't feel like I'm really old enough to deserve something like that, and I'm so flattered. And some of the performances are so amazing that some of the songs I'll never do again, because they do them so much better than I do. But it was really so sweet and thoughtful.
So some of those covers have made you think differently about performing that particular song yourself.
Yeah, like in particular, Dee Carstenson's version of Compass. And she plays the harp, and she just turned it into high art. And I was like, oh my God, I wrote that. I can't believe I wrote that. Because she just took it to a whole other place. And Susan Werner with the song Replaced, she just rips your heart out with it the way she sings it. And by the way, Dee Carsonson was one of the singers yesterday who's up for doing that. And we tried to get Susan Werner, but she was booked in another city. But it was so nice that they all did that. I still can't believe it.
As you say, you didn't know they were doing it at the time. How did they spring the surprise on you?
Oh man, they did it. They surprised me on stage, and it's the way they did it. And I don't like surprises. I got to tell you, I don't like surprise parties. But to be surprised on stage in front of an audience, and it was a show that I was emceeing, and there were a bunch of performers in the show, and we had to do 2 shows, and the first show was running a little late. So just before we're getting ready to wrap it up and go into our finale, this guy gets up at the mic and starts saying he had one more thing. And I guess I was sitting there because people said that they said, you should have seen the look on your face. I guess I was so perturbed. I thought he was going to somehow try to do another song in the show or bring a friend up. And I'm thinking, what is he doing? The show's running late. We have another show to do. And instead what he's introducing is this project where they all did my songs. So I went from being sort of angry to being completely shocked, and then on the spot in front of the whole audience, because they all seemed to know about it, the people in the audience.
Yeah.
And my first thing I said was, is there something about my health you're not telling me? Because I thought, you get something like this when you're dead. I was 46 at the time, and now I'm 47, and I'm not that old. Oh, maybe I am. I don't know.
This is a brand new song. I've never performed it, this next one.
Not too long, making the 4 Bitchin' Babes. Can you tell us how that all came together?
Yeah, that was back in 1990, and I had put together a compilation record called On a Winter's Night, which was actually just a little cassette with 21 songs on it by 21 different songwriters, all about winter and nighttime. And I did a tour with the winter of 1989, and it was so well received that people wanted something. They wanted another tour like that, but they didn't want to wait till winter. So my agent said, of all the people who were on that 21-song compilation, can you imagine like 3 other songwriters, maybe women, that you'd like to do a tour with? Because that would be sort of its theme. You want to try to come up with an angle, not just have 4 people without a reason for those 4 being together. So I thought, I looked at the list, and I was a big fan of Megan McDonough and Sally Fingerette and Patty Larkin, and I called them all up and said, would you like to do a little tour together? And they said, sure. So we tried it, and the first summer we had a blast, but we ended up in Seattle, Washington, and figuring out that we had spent more money than we had made, and we were 3,000 miles from home, which is not very good economics. So we had one more show scheduled, and it was a couple weeks down the line in Washington, D.C., at a club called the Birchmere. So the plan was to record that show and make a disc so that we could at least go into the black, or at least break even. It was crazy to go out and lose money. And so that's what we did, and then the record came out, and it was so well received that then people wanted more shows. But Patty Larkin didn't want to do it anymore, so we got another girl to take her place. And I guess we tried different people. Cheryl Wheeler did some, Christina Olsen, then Julie Gold came on board, the girl who wrote From a Distance. And then Julie did it for a couple of years, and then she didn't want to do it anymore, so Debbie Smith came on board. And then we even had Mary Travers of Peter, Paul, and Mary did a show, and Janice Ian did a show. And about 18 months ago, I decided that I was ready to go off. I really wanted to work wireless and do some other things, so a girl named Camille West has taken my place. So it's been a 10-year project with many different people in it, and next year we're planning to do a big Babe reunion concert in Boston, invite back all past and present and maybe future babes to do a show together.
Recent medical studies prove that during operations...
Upcoming recording plans, what's on your books in the upcoming year?
Well, I have my home recording studio here that has to be rehooked up. I did the recording for Shining My Flashlight on the Moon in the studio, but then I actually added another piece of equipment, and I've got about 15 songs, and I'm ready to go with it, but it'll take me... I have a lot of concerts, so I'll be recording in between those. over the next 10 months or so. And then I have to decide if I'm going to also put this on my own label, or I'll know in about 6 months if it's going to be financially successful, if I can continue on my own, or if I need to sign up, possibly go back to Round or something like that.
Yeah. Is there a certain style or a certain type of album within you that you haven't had a go at yet that you'd like to try?
Yeah, but this record will probably be it. I have a 16-track studio now, and because I use this piece of equipment on stage called a boomerang phrase sampler, and I get to do all of these fun vocals, this record is going to be very much, it'll be like a girl group record, but I'm going to be the girl group.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to that. It's not going to have a lot of instruments on it, though there is one song that's going to have a nice string arrangement. It'll be very acoustic. And I think the record is going to be called either Bad Girl Dreams or Bad Girl Trapped in a Good Girl's Body. Which one do you like?
I'll have the second one, actually.
Yeah, Bad Girl Trapped in a Good Girl's Body. Yeah, because I can imagine a lot of people looking at that title and say, oh, I know who I should give this to.
And just to finish up, your standard piece of advice for young songwriters on the way up.
Oh, well, the most important thing is that, it doesn't happen overnight. I look at Shawn Colvin as someone who I've been, watching her career. She came up through the Greenwich Village music scene, and the first time I saw her play was probably 1983, and it was really clear from the first moment that someone like her was very special, and she had really great potential to become a big pop star. But, it took at least 12 or 13 years of incredibly hard work for her to achieve the level of success that she has. But there are a lot of other performers who are very good and work hard, who are not big pop stars like her, but have very solid careers. There's a guy named Utah Phillips who says, if you're serious about this music, you can make a living, but not a killing. And if you can really set your sights on a moderate success where you can feel that you don't compromise your soul, and write about things that really matter to you, and practice all you can, and support yourself any way you can. Julie Gold, the woman who wrote From a Distance, she also worked as a temp when she came to New York, and never took handouts, and never accepted situations where people would